Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. So we're launched into a political election campaign, and the election is going to be on June the 2nd. And we've got a new political party that has been launched and is fighting this election. And I wanted to reach out to one of the local candidates, George Cescon, who is a local real estate individual, very involved in a bunch of different real estate endeavors over the course of the last bunch of years. And he's put his name forward to run for this Ontario party in the riding of Mississauga Lakeshore. George, how are you? Welcome to the show.
Good. Thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me on. Pleasure. And just really excited to be here and to talk a little bit about our party.
I appreciate it. So you've had quite the background in business. You're currently with Cushman & Wakefield, senior manager of projects. And before that, you've had numerous different real estate development and business roles. Why would someone like you want to give all that up and run for a brand new political party in politics, particularly in today's environment?
Sure. Great question. Brian, I really truthfully looked at the last couple of years, what's been going on in our country, in our province. It really hit home for a lot of reasons. I've talked to a lot of people that feel the same about what's been going on in our areas. What's been going on with our freedom and what's been happening with our rights being taken away. And, you hear the news and you kind of wonder, can I make a difference? Can I get in there and really truthfully make a difference and try to help the people that I talk to and who are near and dear to our hearts, family, and friends. So we wanted to just be there, be that voice to help make a difference.
And so how do you think you're going to make a difference? And what is it that the Ontario Party stands for that you think is better than what has been represented in the balance of politics?
Sure. So our platform is based on family, freedom, truth, transparency, faith. We're all about not having the rights taken away. So if somebody wants to go to church, they should be able to still go to church. I mean, if you still need to take the protocols, which we're doing anyway. When I go to church on Sundays, there's, they still have every pew is there's people in one pew, and then there's the row behind them are empty, and then there's there are people in behind, and they wear masks, and everybody is really cognizant of that. They respect each other, and they really they really follow the protocol. So we're all about faith. There's a lot of children that have had to wear masks in schools. That they have to wear them for 8 hours a day, and we're saying, why are you making children wear masks for 8 hours a day? You don't do that. You don't make adults wear masks for 8 hours a day. I can go to work, Brian. Once I get to work, I can take my mask off. Well, we don't have to wear one today because you've taken that one off the table. You don't have to if you don't want to. But I know children. My grandson being one of them, going to school in kindergarten and having to wear a mask for 8 hours for the whole day and not being allowed to take it off. That's really hard on them. You talk about mental health, you talk about things that have been happening to people. It's not right.
Hasn't most of that gone away? You talk about masks. Most of the mask mandates have gone away. I think they're only really still in transit and long-term care homes. Isn't this an issue of a year ago or a couple months ago rather than now?
Well, it is, but it also there's still some retail places that would still ask you to put it on, even though it's not an issue with the government. They've taken it off the table, saying it's up to the individual whether or not they want to wear one. It's still being mandated across Ontario in some particular instances, depending if you're going to a museum or if you're going to, like you said, and that I totally agree with the long-term care facilities where you never know who's coming in there, if they could be sick, and just to take that precautionary step. And the Ontario Party does not say you can't wear a mask, that we don't want you to wear a mask. What they're saying, it's the freedom of choice. If you like to wear one, by all means, we respect that.
Okay, but what about those businesses? If those businesses I went to a barber shop, and the barber wore a mask and wanted me to wear a mask because he was elderly and worried. And so if you believe in freedom, shouldn't the retailers have the freedom to ask their tenants, their clients, to put on masks if they so desire? It's their
Sure.
health.
No, absolutely, and that's where I was going with this. Is again, we're not totally against masks. It's about the freedom and the right and the choice of having to wear one or not wear one. If that particular business, and by the way, Brian, when I go get my haircut, the same rules apply. They've asked me to wear a mask when I'm in there, just because of the closeness of all the people and who's cutting my hair, and I respect that, and so I'll put one on out of respect. But I don't think that I need to be forced to wear one when I'm walking outside to my car. I don't think I need to be forced to wear one in a grocery store when I'm 20 feet away from somebody that I'm not actually involved with. So these are the things, the mandates that have been lifted for good reason, that we're looking at and saying, how does that take away from our freedom and the Charter of Rights that, have been proposed that are slowly being taken away?
We're chatting tonight with George Cescon, who is a candidate for the new Ontario Party, which is a new party that's just been launched for this upcoming provincial election in Ontario. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back more with George in just a minute. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. So we're launched into a provincial election, and we've got a couple new parties. And one of the new parties that is competing this election is the Ontario Party, that was formally registered prior to the 2018 provincial election and ran a small number of candidates at that point in time. Derek Sloan, former member of Parliament federally, has become the leader of the party, and announced when he launched this party that he thought that there was room for social conservatives and libertarians and defenders of freedom in Ontario, for there to be an alternative to the four left-wing parties. His quote was, "There's a tremendous desire on the part of social conservatives, libertarians, and defenders of freedom in Ontario for there to be an alternative to the four left-wing parties." George, do you really think that the Conservative Party, the Progressive Conservative Party, is left-wing, just like the Liberals and the NDP and the Green, I guess?
Yeah, you know what? They actually have come to the left, and they've moved over, and if they're not totally to the left, they're certainly in the middle, because they're not the right wing party that they used to be, and you could see that over the last couple of years with the Ford government, on how they've teamed up with the Liberals insofar as what their mandates are, all the bills that have been passed. And yeah, I totally agree with Derek. We agree with the Ontario Party platform where it stands. We're the right-wing Conservative Party as far as we're concerned.
There's another right-wing party called the Blue Party that's also running. How do you differ from the Blue Party?
Well, the Blue Party, we have some similar values. But where the Blue Party comes in, I can like to tell you a story that Derek had told us, was that we were actually going to team up with the Blue Party at the beginning of while we were formulating our party, but unfortunately it didn't come to light. I think there was just a lot of different particular thoughts and what their mandates were compared to our mandates, and for reasons I can't really speak to as much as Derek can. The party was never formulated into one. So we've been around since 2018. We do have a seat. Rick Nichols has a seat in Parliament at Queen's Park. And what we're trying to do here now, we've got about 90 candidates, which is just fantastic, compared to where we were 4 years ago. And this is just wonderful news that, we've got a lot of people that believe in what we're trying to do here as the conservative right-wing party for Ontario moving forward.
Why do you think there needs to be a new party for these social conservative, libertarian, and freedom issues that you and Derek are talking about. Are you not being heard within the Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario?
Yeah, well, that's part of it. As you know, Derek was with the Conservatives and had left a couple of years ago because of that reason. Derek was trying to promote the theories based on right-wing conservative political views, and for those reasons, he was asked to leave. And so that's why he's now with the with the Ontario Party. There's a lot of things out there. We talk about transparent. And I mentioned about freedom and faith, and now we're looking at transparency. We're looking at family. We're looking, at fiscal responsibility, Brian, which is something that I don't know where the money's going, what's happening here, but we're spending money like money is growing on trees, and there's got to be some sort of fiscal responsibility, because at the end of the day, who's going to pay for that? Our children, our grandchildren. And to me, that's we have to be fiscal responsible for what's going on here. You can't just throw money away.
So Derek Sloan, your leader, was ejected from the Conservative caucus, supposedly, according to the then leader, Aaron O'Toole, because of a pattern of destructive behavior. And it was found that he had received a donation from a known white supremacist. What do you think of his eviction from the Conservative Party?
Well, first of all, if you were to look that up, it says allegedly. So it's not that actually really happened. So let's put that one to bed. And I think with Derek, he's free. He freely speaks about that. He has nothing to hide. He's very truthful. People come up to him in the street. When actually we were in Port Credit 2 days ago. He came in. We met downtown at the Starbucks by the river over by the lighthouse, and we had 50 people turn up, and there was people walking by, and they came and they joined us, and they asked Derek about that, and his views have never changed. He's trying to bring in the views of the people of the Conservative Party right wing, and we can't have. You talk about critical, CRT, Bill 67, the critical race theory. How's that? What's that doing for us? And our governments are not challenging that. They're passing bills in the middle of the night. Do you know Bill 100 got passed at midnight before the long weekend on Easter, and not everybody was there to vote on it. So these are the things that we're trying to stop. We're working for the people. Brian, I can't tell you right now, is so critical that we make the right decisions moving forward in this next provincial election.
So I had the opportunity to interview Derek when he was a candidate for the federal leadership, and very articulate, smart gentleman. There's no question. Mm-hmm. But his views were very socially conservative. He was against the bills outline conversion therapy for gays, and felt very strongly about that. So some have described him as homophobic. Clearly, some people, particularly the Conservative Party, federally thought that he was, a white supremacist, and he needed support of more than 20% of the Conservative Party to stay in caucus, and he didn't even get support from 20% of the Conservative Party. Is there support for white supremacy and homophobic views, social conservative views in Ontario? Do you think enough to elect you and Derek Sloan?
Yeah, well, you know what? I wouldn't say it like that. I wouldn't say it was white supremacy, because I don't believe that Derek believes in that. That's not where we stand for. That's certainly not what our platform stands for. So the conversion, you talk about conversion therapy, and yeah, is it right that that somebody changes sex, and you hear it all the time on the news, all of a sudden you have a guy that's competing in women's sports. And is that right? Or should the guy, either stay with the men and compete there, or are they really allowed to compete in universities, under the women? And I think the last story I heard was this gentleman that won the swimming competition ended up coming in like 32nd with the men, but then when he transferred over to the women, he was like the top three, or he won the race. And so this is the type of thing that we're not really in favor of. As far as the white supremacy, there's been no discussion about us, our party going that way, or supporting that at all, Brian, not at all. So
the actual the bill that he voted against and that was at issue wasn't in regards to conversion from male to female or female to male, but what it was different programs that have been in place by some churches and some other organizations that would try to convince people that believed that they were homosexual, gay, lesbian, bisexual, whatever, to try to persuade them not, that they weren't, and that it was inappropriate. So, it's like pray the gay out of you is the way that some people have described it. And that was the bill that the Liberal government was trying to pass that would outlaw those kinds of programs. And Derek thought that those programs were things that should be allowed to continue, and parents and other people could send their children to such programs. How do you feel about those programs?
Yeah, I think I think again it's up to the individual and the right of what they believe in. We're not going to have everybody that's going to, as you say, pray to gay. Like it's not about that. It's about having, again, the freedom of choice about whether or not you want your kids growing up in that environment. You look at what the schools are teaching. They're trying to pass bills that will teach this in the schools, and we're not for that. We don't think that sexual education for kindergartens, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3 it should be taught. We think that that's a time and place for another another time, another era, another when the kids get older. Brian, I don't know about you, but when we never talked about sex in school till we were in early high school, or grade 8. It was later on in life that we were being taught sex education in school. And now they're talking about bringing in the schools early so that they can talk about gays and lesbians and LGBTQ and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, we're opposed to that. We're opposed to that for the young children to be exposed to that at this time.
So the current sex education program in Ontario is one of those things that you'd want to, and the Ontario Party would want to change.
Yeah, we'd look at that, absolutely.
Okay. Libertarian is one of the other things that the Ontario Party stands for. What do you mean by libertarian, and what would you change in our government regulation?
Well, I think when you look at the again, I'll talk about the CRT, the Bill 67, critical race theory, and when you look at libertarian, you look at what it is. It identifies racism in Ontario, and it talks about privileges. It talks about minorities, individuals, but it says you can't discriminate against the race, the creed, religion. But then it goes into talking about blacks and different races, but it doesn't talk about white. What about anti-racism against the white people? Like, it doesn't speak to that when you look at what the critical race theory actually talks about. And so this is something that we oppose, and we don't agree with it, and it's got to be reformed.
So Bill 67 spoke to a couple of things. It amended that required the minister to report if, in the opinion of the minister, there's indication that the boards teacher induction program does not include anti-racism and racial equity training. So that teacher programs had to have something about anti-racism and racial equity. 2 years ago, we had Black Lives Matter and the protests around the world, frankly, United States primarily, but Canada as well, because of the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis. And lots of people talked about institutional racism. And at that point in time, the province of Ontario actually put in place a supervisor for the Board of Education in Peel, because it was deemed that the Peel board was racist. And so this would effectively put in training for teachers to be anti-racist and racial equity. You think that's wrong?
Yeah, so there are a couple of points there, Brian, that you bring up, and I'm glad you brought this up, because I've spoken to some teachers, and in fact, the teachers do not have any rights, whether they agree with it, whether they disagree with it. The platform has been set, mandated on what their curriculum is and what they're supposed to be teaching. So whether it has to do with anti-racism, whether it has to do with anti-blacks, whether it has to do with BLG, Black Lives Matter group, they have to teach that in the schools. And what we're saying is, what happened to O Canada? What happened to the Lord's Prayer? What happened to getting back to talking about Canadian history? Where is this? Where's the program going? This is what we're trying. We're not against any of the groups. We're not against having some sort of teachability within the schools, but it is actually being forced amongst the teachers. It's being forced and driven down to the students, who, quite frankly, don't want to hear about that. They want to learn. They want to learn about history. They want to learn about how they got there. What's important? What about Christian values? What about some of the different teachings that had happened in the past that no longer get looked at anymore? So the program itself really needs to be overhauled and just have a look at. And that's something that we want to do, Brian. We want to have a look at the program with the mandates of what the teachers are allowed. Because I'll tell you quite frankly, if you're a teacher and you don't agree with what the program is, you're out. They're saying this is what we're teaching. You don't have a say. And I don't think it was anything to do with racism. It's got to do everything with what needs to be taught through the government policies.
No, but this specific program said nothing about O Canada. So you can still sing O Canada, and there's no restriction there. As far as Christian values and the Lord's Prayer in the Catholic school board and schools, that still exists. I don't believe that you're allowed to say the Lord's Prayer in public schools. That religion is not supposed to be part of that. I think Judeo-Christian values are something that's part of our whole culture in Canada, and I don't think there's a restriction against that, but not calling them necessarily Christian values. And as far as what is being forced, what it's saying is that there has to be training for the teachers in regards to anti-racism. So what would be inappropriate would be white supremacist or racist teachings. So are you saying that if a teacher wants to teach racism or white supremacy, they should have the right to do that?
No, what I think needs to happen is I honestly believe that the curriculum that's being fed down through the system from the government needs to be looked at. What is that the people want their kids to learn? What is it that they want to learn? Because all of a sudden now, it just seems to be that, well, you know what, there's all these groups out there that talk about racism, they talk about this, they talk about that. So we need to teach that in the schools. So when the kids grow up, they're going to understand that. And that's okay to a certain point. But my point being is that, you say that the Lord's Prayer is not allowed in public schools. It was allowed in public schools before. So why was it taken out? It was allowed in public schools.
Oh, I presume it was because they deemed the public schools were not religious schools. The Catholic system is a religious school. And, John Tory, when he was leader of the Progressive Conservative, ran on a policy of allowing lots of religious schools and was soundly defeated because people were worried that our public system would completely separate out into Jewish schools and Muslim schools and Christian schools and Sikh schools and whatever, and faith-based schools were voted against. And so I think that the populace in general likes the idea of having public schools that aren't religious, but at the same time does have the separate school system, the Catholic board that has some religion. And if you want to go to a Muslim school or a Jewish school, you can, but it's private. And one of the top schools in Canada from mathematics and technology is a Muslim school in your riding that is private, and it is graduating some of the smartest, well-educated kids in a Muslim educated school. But you've got to pay if you want to go to that. And so, I think that the decision's been made over time that the public school should be public, should be for everyone, shouldn't be necessarily Christian. And I guess you disagree with that.
Well, I don't disagree with what you're saying, Brian, insofar as that if, again, you make a good point, because what you're saying is that people have a choice. If they want to go to a Muslim school, they can go to a Muslim school. If they want to go to a private school, they go to a private school. If they want to go to Catholic school, public school, they have that choice. All we're saying is, why are we changing our values on the way we think, being in a democratic society where we have Christian values, and why are we deciding to take that out of the schools? We don't understand why that's being done, and we want to relook at that. We don't think that's the way to go, because you're saying if you go to a Muslim school, are you saying that they don't say Muslim prayers if they go to a Muslim school?
So they do, and the Muslim school, is a top school, and it's in your riding. Right. I'd encourage you to go check it out. It's in the Sheridan Research Park. And then, also in your riding is a top Catholic school, Holy Name of Mary for girls, and they separated out from the actual Catholic public school system because they didn't think that it was Christian enough and religious enough. And so, if you want to have a lot of religion, you can actually choose, but pay, because it's a private school, to go to Holy Name of Mary in your riding. But the separate schools, the Catholic schools, have to, while they have some religion clearly, because they're Catholic, they have to accept all people in the area that want to go, whether they're Catholic or not, and they have to teach the Ontario curriculum, albeit they can add in religion classes. Right. and from what I understand, I haven't been to one recently, but from what I understand, we'll repeat the Lord's Prayer during assemblies and in the morning, and so therefore they're very clearly Christian and Catholic, but allow but ensure that they teach the balance of the Ontario curriculum. The public schools are meant to be non-religious, and you compare this to Quebec, where they're taking religion completely out, and it's actually a right-wing government that is fighting to take all religion, whether Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Sikh, or whatever, out of any kind of teaching. And as you know, teachers were fired because they expressed their religion, whether it be Muslim or Christian, and similar things have happened in France. So the world is going to less religion in school, while you're arguing for more. Anyway, it's interesting. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back more with George Cescon, who is running for the Ontario Party in Mississauga Lakeshore in the upcoming provincial election. And maybe we'll go from social conservative issues and talk a little bit more about the economy and freedom in the next segment. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We've got a provincial election coming up, and the writ drops this week, and it's on to 30 days of arguments and signs and campaign meetings and all candidates meetings and lots of advertising and lots of stuff coming up to a June 2nd election date. And we've got a couple new political parties on the spectrum. One of them is the Ontario Party, led by Derek Sloan, a former Conservative MP, member of Parliament in the federal Parliament system. He was also a leadership candidate during the last, actually not the last two leadership candidates elections ago federally. I had the privilege of interviewing him during that process. And he's no longer a federal Conservative. He was evicted from that party over what was deemed at the time to be white supremacist and socially too far socially conservative values for the Conservative caucus federally. And is now and ran in the last election, did not win, but is now relaunched this Ontario Party and is the leader of the party. And they've actually nominated lots of candidates across the province. One of them being George, who's a long-term real estate individual in Toronto and Mississauga, and he's put his name forward, which takes some guts to ever put your name forward on a ballot and run, particularly for a brand new smaller party. George, let's talk. We've talked about some of the social conservative issues so far. Let's turn to some of the other ones. One of the things that your party is standing for, and you've talked about a couple of times, is freedom. And I'd like to talk about freedom a little bit. Freedom is one of those things that most people would identify as an American value, something that clearly people talk about a lot. I was out in North Battleford, Saskatchewan recently, and I ended up meeting the leaders of two different Indigenous bands, and one was a council of 8 different Indian bands, and the other one of 2 different Indian bands. And they said when they see a Canadian flag on a vehicle today, in a truck today, it doesn't say what the Canadian flag used to say. It now is comparable to the Confederate flag, and it says white supremacy. And that comes because of the truck convoy and the protests in Ottawa, where the Canadian flag and shouts for freedom were identified with people that were there in Ottawa that they deemed to be white supremacists. And I did a little survey of my own, completely unscientific, but I drove from Toronto to Ottawa last weekend, and there were more than a dozen cars or trucks waving the Canadian flag. So not hundreds, but a dozen. Each one of those had F blank Trudeau as a bumper sticker, like every single one. Not one had a Canadian flag without having that bumper sticker. Everyone did. And so therefore it's this portion of society that obviously want freedom, are flying the Canadian flag and think very negatively about our current prime minister and talk about it in unbelievably derogatory terms. What's happened?
Well, let me tell you, I think the people are just fed up with the government, with the Trudeau government, with the Conservative, with the Doug Ford government. And you bring up a really good point about freedom. And I sort of alluded to that when we first had this conversation at the beginning, was people want the right to have the choice. They don't want to be mandated. You talk about the truck drivers in Ottawa. Brian, I was down there as well. I was down in Ottawa when the truckers were down there. And I can absolutely unequivocally tell you that it was the most peaceful demonstration that I had ever seen or been at and part of. People were they were there for the same reason. They were there because they did not want the mandates. Now, we're not saying that if somebody wants to take the booster shot, that they're not allowed to, but give people the right. Stop firing people because they can't go to work because of the fact they didn't get the booster shot. We need to look at that. We need to look at why the Trudeau government, why the Conservative government were calling the truck drivers Nazis and terrorists and everything at the rally. The people were there. They were kids there. They were people giving out food. toys to children. They were trying to help businesses along the way. There was nothing going on the way the government had painted that dirty picture of what happened in Ottawa. And I can tell you, sir, none of that happened. I was there. That there was a very, very well organized demonstration. I was there with family, went down there, and it was a wonderful experience. I'm glad
So the trucker protest, the Freedom Convoy, took over downtown Ottawa, took over Wellington Street and several others. And one of the criticism was that it blasted horns until 2:00 in the morning, and people had mental health issues because of the horn blasting. That they closed down businesses because they demanded to come in and be served not wearing masks when the provincial regulations didn't allow that. The Rideau Center was closed down for a month. Lots of the restaurants and businesses in the market area were closed down. You think that was all right?
No, that wasn't closed down because of the demonstration. That was closed down because of the city. The city closed it down. The people didn't close it down. That was done specifically by the city and by the government. The Rideau could have remained open. There was a lot of businesses, actually, Brian, that were still open. Some of them, to your point, yeah, they closed down. They thought it was going to be a wild demonstration. There was going to be people getting hurt, windows smashed, all that kind of stuff. None of that happened. So it was up to the individual and the municipality that whether or not they would stay open or not. It wasn't because of the
okay. So let me just correct you if I could. The Rideau Center closed down of their own decision, a private company's decision, right. Not imposed by the municipality or the government. And they did that because the rules put in place by the provincial government mandated that if you went into stores, you had to wear a mask, and if you went into restaurants, you had to wear a mask. And people were obviously opposed to that and were not adhering to that, and so therefore they were at risk of number one, getting fines by the provincial government for not adhering to the provincial regulations at the times, and number two, obviously it was an issue in regards to infection, and that's why the provincial mandates were put in place initially, and so therefore they were closed down. They decided to close themselves down because the protesters weren't adhering to the provincial regulations, and they couldn't control it. And so what you're saying is that if you have the desire to disagree with provincial regulations, you can impose that on local businesses. Is that what you're saying?
No, I didn't say that at all. In fact, I'm saying complete the opposite. I was saying that it is up to the individual whether or not they would. The reason of the demonstration was they had the right to be able to take a booster shot or wear a mask and whatnot. And we'll go back to the story that I said that the children in the schools, they talk about mental health, Brian, about what had happened, about kids wearing masks and they couldn't go to school anymore. They were crying. They didn't want to go to school because they had to wear it for 8 hours. I'm sure you didn't wear a mask for 8 hours a day in your studio. I went to work. I didn't have to wear it 8 hours a day. I got to work. I could take it off and I could sit and do my job. The kids couldn't do that. So being mandated that we have to wear it for 8 hours a day, if you have to wear it in stores, we're not saying otherwise, but take the mandates off the table. Let the people, the saying follow the science. I'm sure you've heard that a couple of times where the people were saying follow the science, right?
We've certainly heard that a lot in the last 2 years.
Yes, we did. But you know what? Follow the results. To come back to that is follow the results. What have the results been? Why are kids now developing liver diseases? Why? Tell me. Is it because of the shots? Is it because why all of a sudden now all these kids are having liver diseases? You tell me. I tell you one thing about our mandate, the Ontario Party Charter. Number one, acknowledge the supremacy of God and the rule of the law. That's what we stand for.
Okay, well, rule of law I would agree with, but not necessarily God, unless you say it's the God that you define. Because I think one of the problems is that too often people say, when they say the supremacy of God, it's my God, not necessarily whatever God you choose. And so I firmly believe that people have the right to choose whoever their own God is. That's a freedom choice. But talk about rule of law. Jean Charest, candidate for the Conservative Party leadership federally, has said Pierre Poilievre should be unqualified to run for leader, because by supporting the truck convoy, he was supporting lawlessness, because it was clearly against the law what they were doing. You being part of that convoy, you effectively were being unlawful if you stayed there after it was deemed unlawful. And I've been in lots of protests, George, probably like you have been. I've brought signs. I've never brought an 18-wheel truck, bouncy castles, and other things. And I do think that we have the right to assemble. We have the right to protest. That's part of the Charter of Rights. But nowhere in the Charter of Rights does it say that you have a right to block a major street, and you have the right to bring an 18-wheel vehicle to blare horns. And so I think that any society has some constraints on freedom. We have to drive on the right-hand side of the road. If I wanted complete freedom, I should be able to drive everywhere. And there's been studies that show that actually the roundabout around the Champs-Élysées is far better than a traffic signalized intersection, because people are careful when there's no lanes on the road, and they are very careful that they make sure that they don't crash into anyone. And it's sort of practice that everyone goes to the right. And if you've ever been and driven around the Champs-Élysées, there are no lanes, and it's a complete free-for-all, but it seems to work. That said, we have rules, and you have to drive on the right-hand side here and the left-hand side in England, and everyone follows it. We all have to get our driver's license. We have to have car insurance. We have to wear a bike helmet. We have to get permits for lots of different things, licenses for pets, etc. So if our freedom as part of society is restricted because society in its wisdom believes that certain things, like needing to pay your income tax, needing to which we got to do by Monday, which like, why having a passport? You got to have a passport to go to the United States. If those freedoms are what society has believed are appropriate, why is it that you and your party feel so strongly about masks and vaccines?
And you bring up a couple of good points. So the first one about the demonstration, I just want to touch on that for a minute. We do have the right to demonstrate. We were there. We were there with signs. We were there. The people were there. I understand your point about the truckers being there and blocking some intersections. But when we were there, the truckers were already there. So when we were demonstrating, it was during the day. Some of it was in the evening hours as well, but definitely not till 2, 3 in the morning that you mentioned. Everybody sort of went home. They went to their hotels, whatnot. It was done in a fair manner. I can tell you that the police were there. They were walking around in groups. They were coming up to people, and a lot of them agreed with what was going on. They said, this shouldn't be happening. We don't know why the government has not stepped up to the plate and come out and meet with the truckers, meet with the people, have a conversation. That's all they were asking for, Brian. They were just asking to meet. They wanted to be heard. And what did the governments do? They dismissed them like they weren't there, till it got to a point where more and more people rallied, more and more truckers came out, more and more things happened. So if you want to start looking at what the real cause and effect was here, look at the local governments not stepping up to the plate, not addressing the issues of what was on the table of free democratic society, which has been taken away. And let me tell you this, slowly but surely, all these little rights are being taken away. All these little bills are coming in. And you know what? We need to wake up, because one day we're going to sit there and we're going to say, how did this happen? Why didn't we stick up for ourselves when this was being proposed before? And that's how the governments are working. They're tabling little bills one at a time to when, all of a sudden you're going to look at each other and you're going to say, how did this happen? How did this happen? And people honestly feel the same way. They just want what's right for them. What is right? Look, we've got to get back to basics. We've got to get back to basics, Brian. We have to find out what it is that the people want. And if the people want this, then sure, absolutely. But we want to give a voice. We want to have that voice in Parliament at Queen's Park come June the 2nd about what the Ontario Party stands for. And I'll say it again, our family, our freedom, our faith, truth, transparency, and fiscal responsibility. And I don't think you're going to get anybody.
Brand new party. Do you think you have a chance of winning?
Uh, the my writing, yes, I think I have a chance. Of course I do.
It's admittedly a small chance. The Ontario Party hasn't ever elected a member. You've got one now because he left the Conservative caucus. The chance is low, and you have to. Let's accept for a second that you would admit the chance is low. Why would you run if the chances are so low?
Because of, again, I'm running because of the platform. I'm running because of what I believe in. I do not believe in the Conservative Liberal Party platform. I believe in what the Ontario Party stands for. I believe in the direction that they're going and what they stand for with the people. That's why.
I congratulate you for running and putting your name forward. I don't agree with a lot of what you say, but I do think that one of the challenges with our democratic system today is it's difficult, if not impossible, for people like you to have your voice heard. And I think one of the mistakes that we've made in the last while is we haven't allowed people to have their voices heard. And I think that democracy is all about and should be all about having voices heard. And so I congratulate you for putting your name forward. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to interview you and showcase both you and your party and some of your views. We're going to take a break and come back with some concluding comments in just 2 minutes. Everybody, stay with us. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. My guest tonight is George Cescon, who is a candidate for the Ontario Party in the upcoming provincial election in the riding of Mississauga Lakeshore. I really wanted to have George on the show tonight to talk about some of the parties that other people don't necessarily think about and what their issues are. Because I do think that one of the things that George has talked about is that the voices necessarily haven't been heard in the last little while. And I've done a couple of shows on the trucker protests. There were 15% of Canadians that supported the trucker protest, according to polls. That's 3.5 to 4 million, maybe in 4.5, depending on exactly what those percentages are, of people that supported that. So the vast majority of Canadians are double vaccinated. The vast majority of Canadians actually disagreed with the trucker convoys and the occupation and wanted the government to take actually a stronger action against them. But that wasn't everybody. And I wonder why they didn't think that their voices were being heard. And I believe one of the reasons why they didn't believe their voices were being heard because no one was listening to them. The federal government refused to go and listen to their complaints. If we had proportional representation and Max Bernier, for an example, had a seat in the House of Commons, which given his percentage win in the last election, he would have had a seat. He would have been able to argue, and other people would have been able to hear his arguments. And if they disagreed, and given popular opinion polls and the way the popular opinion worked out, they would have defeated whatever arguments he made in regards to freedom and mask mandates and vaccines, et cetera. But the problem is, when you're not listened to and you're not heard, what do? You protest. And I think that's what happened. And I think that too often the elites, and whether it's the Laurentian elite that people talk about, or whether it's the elites in governments in Queen's Park or Ottawa, they dismiss people on the right, people on the left, people that have views that they don't agree with, and they don't even listen to them and they don't take them into account. And that leads to friction in society and problems. And so while I disagree with George, and I disagree with George in regards to some of his comments in regards to this extreme freedom, because I do think that society has a lot of different things that people want, but on vaccine mandates. And if you've been listening to my show, you know that I believe that you should have either during the worst parts of the pandemic, either had a vaccine or had to prove that you tested negatively, which was different than the vaccine mandates that governments were imposing. And I did that in my own business, where we allowed people to come to work and work if they could prove that they were not infected. While other vaccine mandates were you had to be vaccinated, yes or no. And George has talked about following the science. I've gotten COVID, and my doctor and the CDC just last week came out with a thing saying don't get a vaccine for 6 months because I'm super. My antibodies are there because I got COVID. And one of the things that the vaccine mandates, both in Canada and the United States for 2 years, never included was the fact that if you actually had COVID, you were immune or you had some immunity because you had the antibodies, and so therefore, effectively the vaccine mandates were telling you something that right now science is telling you not to do, which is get a vaccine on top of the antibodies that you got from the infection. And so the vaccine mandates that were put in place weren't exactly what I think should have been put in place. It should have had an out for a negative test or the fact that you had actually had the virus and had antibodies because of that. So what does that mean? It means that I don't agree with George saying that we didn't need anything, but I effectively agree with George that maybe we needed to have more flexibility. Bottom line, I think that we need the press, the media, the electorate to pay more attention to George and the Ontario Party. We need to give all parties the right to be at the all candidates meetings and to be heard so that in the end, we get to decide. And I worry that for the next month, the mainstream media is only going to focus on 3 parties, and maybe they'll talk once in a while about the Green. But the vast majority of time, they're not going to be even focused on what George and Derek Sloan have got to say or any of the other parties. And that's a mistake. And then they'll feel unheard, and that'll lead to frustration and protests in the further. So I think what we need is more democracy in our democracy, and we don't have enough. And I think that while I disagree with some of the things that George has said in regards to his social conservatism and libertarian values, and Derek Sloan particularly, I think that George and Derek deserve to be heard and considered. And if you want to vote for them, you should vote for them. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. George, last word to you, sir.
Yeah. First and foremost, Brian, I just wanted to say thank you very much for having me on. It was a pleasure being able to speak about the Ontario Party here on your show. I ask, about you talk about the vaccines and the mandate, and I think incorrectly we're calling them vaccines, and they shouldn't be called vaccines. Vaccines are a cure, and we don't have a cure. They thought there would be a cure, and it's not. People have died from these shots. People have, and this is what we're wanting to although I agree in some of your statements, I don't agree with everything you've said, but you have the right to be able to have the flexibility, whether or not you want to take the shots or not. And that's what we stand for. I would also just say about the truckers, the last couple of years before they had the mandates, and this is part of the reason they were protesting, we didn't have to have they weren't mandated to take shots, and all of a sudden now they were. So you tell me if somebody's in their cab by themselves, that they're going to affect everybody while they're making a delivery thousands of miles away. We don't see that, not either does the truckers. So that was part of the reason, and you're right, nobody was being heard. And I think had the Ford government stepped up to the table, met with them, Trudeau government would have done the same thing, all this would have went away. It would have been dealt with. You talk about following the science, follow the results. I want to only say to everybody, we encourage you to have a look at the Ontario Party platform. It's called the website is ontarioparty.ca. List of candidates are on there. Please go in there and have a look. And by all means, my email address is on there. I'd be glad to speak with anyone, or if anybody has any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.
George Cescon, candidate for the Ontario Party in the upcoming provincial election in the riding of Mississauga Lakeshore. Thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Brian.
That's our show for tonight, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Good night, everybody.